Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to another session of Economy Weekly Recap, wherein we take all the important current affairs articles on Indian economy which have appeared in different newspapers and analyze these articles. And in this video, these are the 6 very important articles that we will be looking at. Before we start with the analysis, the first very important announcement, we at Unacademy have cut down the prices of a course from over 75,000 rupees to 24,999. If any of you are interested, we have 3 courses starting from May 7th. First one is Arhamb, which is a bilingual course. Second one is the Triumph batch in English, and the third one is Lakshya batch in Hindi. Those who are interested, please check out the details or give a call on the number provided in the description. Second very important thing, I'm pretty sure all of you know this by now, we have launched the Conquer Prelims initiative. There are 2 components to the Conquer Prelims. One is the static portion coverage through MCQs, and the second one is the current affairs coverage again through MCQs. The static portion initiative is being held on the platform. This is the timetable. Please have a look at this. And the timing is every day 6 p.m. Second one is the current affairs initiative on our English YouTube channel. That is the very same channel in which you are watching the video right now. The classes will be taken live at 7:30 p.m. every day. We would love if you join these initiatives live. Please do not keep on postponing and thinking that you will watch all the videos in a lump sum. In that particular situation, you will have more than 50 sessions here, more than 30 sessions here. It becomes very difficult to watch all the sessions in one go. Please join the session live. Any queries, any doubts you have, get them clarified through the educator in the live session itself. Now, let's start the discussion. The first very important article which grabbed headlines in almost all the newspapers in India was the GST collections for the month of April, which has crossed more than 2 lakh crore rupees, that is totaling 2.1 lakh crore. What are the important points? Point number 1, the amount that is mentioned here, that is 2.1 lakh crore rupees, it becomes the highest amount of GST revenue collection for a particular month. Now you will be worried, or you will be basically looking at what factors have actually led to this particular rise in the GST revenues. And when I say you will be worried, such type of information is not given in all the newspapers, especially in this article. So now the question arises, what actually has happened? Why the GST revenues have crossed more than 2 lakh crore rupees, and why the government of India is celebrating this? The reasons or the causes behind this particular rise in the GST receipts are, first one, the election season. The election season. Now some of you will be looking at this particular point and wondering, what is the connection? How election season can actually contribute to higher GST revenue collection? Please understand, GST is basically a tax which is imposed on the sale of goods and services. And during election season, there will be so much sale of goods and services, it has actually contributed to higher GST revenue collection. That's the first one. Second one, the month itself is very, very important. That is, the April's data, that is 2.1 lakh crore, is based on the consumption that has happened in the month of March. And please understand this, the month of March represents the last month in a financial year. That is, the companies will be closing their account books, and whatever positions they have, whatever, let's say, the payments that they owe to the government, that they want to basically give it off and close their positions, close their account books. That is also the second reason what has contributed to higher amount of GST revenue collection. Third very important reason, the reforms or the measures which have been taken by the government over a period of time in order to promote in order to promote higher or right amount of tax payment, in order to plug the loopholes in the leakages of GST revenue collection, in order to plug the issues of avoidance and evasion, these measures also have contributed to the GST collections here. And the fourth very important point, this point is very important, that is basically the GST revenue collections are representing higher consumption in the domestic market. Higher consumption in the domestic market. Now, why this point I said is very important. In the last couple of years, no doubt, the GST growth rates, India has been clocking one of the highest GDP growth rates in the global market. And with that, even the GST growth rates have been good. GST collections have been good. But one concern that has been raised very often is, whatever GDP growth rates or whatever recovery we are experiencing, it is not a growth rate which represents the overall improvement in the situation of everyone in India. In simple terms, argument was, it is a K-shaped recovery. But rather now Government of India is using this particular GST revenue collection to prove the point that no, it is not just the consumption amongst the rich people that is contributing to GST revenue. Even the rural growth in the demand for goods and services has contributed to higher GST revenue collection. In fact, one particular point that has been mentioned regarding this GST revenue collection is that you will collect the GST, that is in the form of IGST, whenever imports will come into India. And whenever the goods are sold and consumed in the domestic market, on that also you will impose the GST and collect. The growth rate in the consumption or the growth rate in the GST revenue that is collected on the goods and services that have been sold in the domestic market has shown a very high growth rate compared to the GST revenue collection growth rate on the imports, which basically indicates that there is a rising demand for goods and services in the domestic market itself. And that's the reason I said the fourth point is very important, which represents a broad-based consumption story or the growth of the demand in the market rather than concentrated growth of goods and services consumption. These are the important points. Now let's go beyond this. Another very important point that has been mentioned regarding the GST collections is the GST compensation cess. GST compensation cess. The government has noted that even the GST compensation cess that has been imposed and collected has been one of the highest amount of compensation cess. But more importantly, you please make a note of this. The GST compensation cess, which has been implemented since the introduction of GST back in the year 2017, right now the cess is collected by the government only for the purposes of repaying the loans that the Government of India took during pandemic to pay for the compensation incurred by the states, that is under recoveries or revenue losses that the states incurred during compensation. For payment of that, the Government of India borrowed money and the cess is being used to repay those particular loans. Now before I go forward, let me ask you a very simple question. I said the compensation cess, Government of India is continuing to collect it. Till what time period? Till the end of which year government has planned as of now to collect compensation cess? Will it continue to collect it till perpetuity, or is there a time frame? If you know the answer, please provide the answer in the comment section. Now this is one more very important point mentioned in the article. Now what is the importance of it? You have understood 2.1 lakh crore rupees, very good, government is happy, right? This basically will be used for reforms. Understand this. This should be used by the government to implement reforms under the GST. Right? Don't just look at the number and just by heart the number and go forward. Understand what are the implications. Many of the experts are saying Government of India should use this opportunity of having collected the highest amount of GST receipts to implement reforms. What kind of reforms am I talking about? One general concern that has been raised regarding the GST structure right now is that there are multiple rates under GST. There are multiple rates under GST. That is, you have 0%, 5%, 12, 18 and 28%. Again, these are the major slabs. I'm not even counting those particular slabs under composition scheme. These are the major slabs. One concern that has been raised by various experts is that this GST structure looks like old wine in a new bottle. What is this old wine in a new bottle? Before GST was implemented, we had multiple indirect taxes with different names. With the introduction of GST, there is only one name, GST. But there are multiple rates under that, which basically looks like old structure, only the name has changed. So various experts have been arguing that Government of India should rationalize the GST tariff structure. In fact, when it was implemented, there was one proposal which was discussed that was basically to merge 12% and 18% into only one slab of 15%. But the Government of India looked at this and said, if they simply merge 12 and 18% and have a slab rate of 15%, that will lead to loss of revenue losses. It will lead to more than 1 lakh crore worth of revenue losses annually for the government. Why so? Most of the goods between 12 and 18% generate tax revenues under 18% slab rate. So if you merge 12 and 18, according to CSAT calculation, that will be good. That will be basically middle point of 15%. But if most of the goods are under the 18%, we'll be losing 3% tax revenue by reducing it to 15%, and overall net impact will be more than 1 lakh crore worth of tax revenues will be lost because of this. And that is a precise reason. Now many of the experts are pointing out that government should be utilizing this particular situation to implement multiple reforms. So these are certain very important points regarding the first article provided. Now based on this, I've given a descriptive question. Though it's been over 6 years, GST is yet to become a good and simple tax. Discuss the issues or concerns relating to GST implementation in 150 words or 250 words. Here I've given 250. In the examination, they might give you 150 words. Look at the statement. Look at the question statement. It says, though it's been more than 6 years, because please understand the GST was implemented from 1st July 2017. 1st July 2017, that was the date on which GST came into force in India. So it's been more than 6 years since the introduction of GST. It is yet to become a good and simple tax. Why so? Many of you will basically criticize me for saying it is yet to become good and simple, because understand this, I'm giving you this question. Even today there are certain issues with GST, right? You cannot deny that there are certain issues in the GST structure. For example, you can write about inverted duty structure. Very often this is mentioned in the newspaper. Inverted duty structure. In many of the cases, it has been found that the GST tax rate on the inputs is greater than the GST tax rate applicable on the output. As a result of this, government will be losing certain amount of tax revenues. It leads to imports of more and more final goods or finished goods rather than importing of raw materials. It will create certain issues, and all of this is happening because of the different tariffs or the slabs which are present under the GST structure. And as such, second issue we have already discussed. That is, we need to rationalize the GST structure. We need to rationalize the GST structure. There are multiple slabs under GST, multiple rates under GST. We need to reduce the number of rates or the slabs under GST. Third issue that has been found with respect to the implementation or the structure of GST in case of India is that many of these manufacturers, right, especially the micro, small and medium enterprises, they are concerned that the compliance burden is slightly on a heavier side. Fourth issue in terms of the GST is basically the issue of revenues for the states. The states, when we were implementing GST, we proposed 100% compensation for the states for a period of 5 years. And this particular 5-year duration is over. And to provide for compensation, we had introduced the concept of compensation cess. Government of India is continuing to impose and collect cess, but from 2022, post June 2022, government has stopped calculating the compensation payment that it owes to the state governments. And many of the states, for example, some of the states from southern part of India, they have been demanding that the GST compensation cess must be continued and revenues must be paid for revenue losses, or revenue losses must be paid for these particular states. And the fifth and the very important point you should mention is the issues of the revenue losses or revenue leakages. Even today, very often, I'm pretty sure you people will be reading in the newspaper where fake invoicing has become a problem related to GST. Right? Many of these particular companies are showing fake invoices, or they are simply claiming a large amount of input tax credit, which leads to loss of tax revenues for the government. So you can write these as issues which are plaguing the implementation of GST, and this is yet to become a good and simple tax as it was originally envisaged. And you should also mention certain way forward, certain recommendations you should provide, by the way. For example, sir, what about the issue of rationalization of GST structure? Is there any recommendation for it? I'll give you one. There is one institution in India, NIPFP, National Institution for Public Financing and Policy, NIPFP. It has recommended that we should merge 12 and 18% and we have only one single tax rate of 15%. Now some of you will simply look at it and say, sir, earlier you said if you do that, there will be loss of revenues. Correct. But this is not the end of the recommendation. Right? Wait for it. This institution says merge 12 and 18%, have 15% slab rate. Now you are concerned about revenue losses. What you can do is increase 5% to 8% and increase 28% to 30%, thereby ensuring that rather than having 5, 12, 18 and 28, you can simply have 8%, 15% and 30% slab rate. So this is one recommendation that you can mention, and this is a very well-known financial institution in India. So these are certain points regarding the first article. Let me go to the second article. Supreme Court rejects plea for allocating spectrum without auction. Very interesting article. Understand the history behind this. Back in the year 2007, then the government, the Minister for Telecom, decided that in order to increase the penetration of telecom services and in order to ensure that the telecom services are provided at affordable prices, of course that was the argument given, the government then decided in all the 20 plus circles we should provide the spectrum at certain prices. That is, rather than auctioning, the government then decided let's allocate the spectrum just based on the certain prices that were decided earlier. Now some of you will be basically confused. Sir, what is this term auctioning that you are using? And what is allocation? Please understand this. If Government of India will promote auctioning, it basically means multiple players who want to purchase or multiple companies who want to purchase this good or a service will have to bid for it. Just like IPL. All of you seen IPL auctioning or heard or at least read about IPL auctioning? Very often you will come across a price tag for a player which will keep on increasing during an auctioning. Apply the same logic here as well. So 2G spectrum, rather than auctioning the 2G spectrum, it was decided that the 2G spectrum would be allocated to various telecom players. And from 2007 to 2008, beginning of 2008, more than 120 licenses for 2G spectrum were allocated by the government. Now there were certain concerns raised. That is, there was a report by CAG, Comptroller Auditor General, which stated that rather than auctioning, when government has gone for the allocation of the 2G spectrum, the government has made loss of revenue, presumptive loss of revenue to the extent of 1.7 lakh crore rupees. That is, in simple terms, government has allocated the spectrum, collected let's say 10 rupee, again just a simple number to make you understand. rather than earning 10 rupee like this, if government rather would have gone for auctioning, it would have earned more and more amount of money. And because they have not done auctioning, they have lost a revenue to the extent of more than 1.7 lakh crores. The issue went up to Supreme Court of India. Supreme Court of India in the year 2012, understand this, Supreme Court of India in the year 2012 cancelled all these 120 plus licenses which were issued by the government earlier. And not just this, Supreme Court of India then mentioned in the 2012 order, any natural resource such as a spectrum should be auctioned. These natural resources such as spectrum should be auctioned, not allocated. So that is basically the history behind this idea of a spectrum auctioning and spectrum allocation. Now fast forward to what is happening today. Government of India last year introduced a bill. They introduced a bill which was passed and became an act, Telecommunications Act 2023. Under Telecommunications Act of 2023, under Schedule 1, Government of India identified 19 circumstances or 19 situations wherein rather than auctioning the spectrum, government would have the power to allocate the spectrum. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. Understand this. Government of India last year introduced the Telecommunications Act, which basically merged multiple acts which were introduced earlier. For example, Telegraph Act of 1885 was merged into this. Merge means all of these 3 different laws were taken, and the new act will be replacing all of the earlier acts. Telegraph Act of 1885, the Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1933, etc., etc. Right? So some of these laws, 3 laws to be very precise, were repealed and a new act was introduced by the government, Telecommunications Act of 2023. Now under this particular act, under Schedule 1, government identified 19 areas or 19 situations such as let's say long distance calling in India, direct to home communications or in-flight calling, etc., wherein Government of India will have the right to allocate the spectrum rather than auctioning the spectrum. Now, in order to implement this, what has the Government of India done? Government of India has approached the Supreme Court of India. Very simple. Government of India has taken this particular document, approached the Supreme Court of India. And the article simply says, the Registrar of Supreme Court of India, under Order 15, Rule 5 of Supreme Court Rules 2013 has rejected this application. It has not entertained this application, they have rejected this particular application. This created a lot of discussion regarding the spectrum auctioning, spectrum allocation by the government. Now, why has the Supreme Court Registrar rejected this application? The rule basically says that whenever certain applications are filed, whenever applications or petitions are filed on the ground that there is no reasonable cause to take up this particular petition, or whatever cause has been provided, it is very vague, and please understand this, it is a frivolous or contains a scandalous matter. In such situations, the Registrar of Supreme Court of India might reject this particular petition. So citing this, the Registrar simply rejected the petition, and Government of India, after this was basically published in all the newspapers, there was one more article which stated that Government of India will have a certain number of days to approach Supreme Court of India again. That is point number 1. And point number 2, certain sources within Government of India have already stated that even though the Supreme Court of India has rejected this petition, it was just to inform Supreme Court of India. Now Government of India will go forward with the allocation of spectrum, not auctioning, but allocation of spectrum under the powers given to it under the new law. Now, what will happen related to this? You will have to wait and see whether Supreme Court of India will be again approached by Government of India. If Supreme Court of India will take it up, will they amend its earlier 2012 order, etc., etc. So, these are certain very important points regarding the second article. Third article, the Competition Commission of India's probe, CCI probe, has founded that Amazon, Flipkart have flouted antitrust laws. Now, what is the issue all about? What is the issue involved in this particular article? Point number one, please understand this. With the onset of these e-commerce companies such as Flipkart and Amazon, there is always a concern which has been raised by various other participants in the economy. For example, the brick and mortar stores or the owners of these brick and mortar stores allege that such e-commerce companies always have a very higher advantage, and because they have a huge advantage, they will always try to kill the competition through various, let's say methods, through various measures that are taken by them. They will try to kill the competition. That is, in essence, they will try to eliminate this particular concept of brick and mortar story, and they will have a kind of a monopoly in the market. And that is exactly what was alleged by Delhi Vyapar Mahasangh back in the year 2019. They allege that these companies provide deep discounts. Deep discounts in essence are basically the sales which are done under which very, very high amount of discounts are provided. In fact, this particular Mahasangh also alleged that such e-commerce companies practice predatory pricing. They practice predatory pricing. Now, what is this idea of a predatory pricing? Please understand this. Generally, whenever you come across the idea or the concept of predatory pricing, the argument is that the companies involved or the providers, of this, who will practice predatory pricing for a short duration, will cut the prices to such an extent that nobody else in the market will be able to compete with them. The pricing cannot be matched by anybody in the market. Now, you will ask me, sir, if they cut down the prices to such an extent, will they incur losses? Will they not incur losses because of this? Of course, yes. In many of the situations, they might incur or they will incur these losses. But the larger picture or the bigger picture is that because the prices are so low, other competitors will not be able to compete. They will go out of the business. Now, these are the only providers who are left out in the market, who have very deep pockets. They will be able to sustain these kind of losses. They will eliminate competition from the market, and now, because these are the only service providers, they will slowly and steadily start rising the prices. You and me as a consumer will not have any other option but to purchase from such type of service providers or goods sellers in the market. So there was an allegation that these practice predatory pricing. In fact, one more allegation, one more issue of concern that was raised by this Mahasangh was exclusive sales. Exclusive sales. What is this issue of exclusive sales? Imagine I'm a imagine I'm a smartphone manufacturer. I'm a producer of smartphones. I will produce a different series of smartphones in this year. The e-commerce companies will force me to sell these smartphones only on their platform. This is very common, by the way, in India. I'm pretty sure you must have observed it. I'll repeat it again. What generally happens in case of exclusive sales for smartphones is that, or electronic gadgets is that, whatever mobile phones I'm going to manufacture, rather than selling it through the recognized channels or other brick and mortar channels, now I'll be forced to enter into a contract with these e-commerce companies, and I can sell these products only through the e-commerce websites or these e-commerce apps to the customers. These are exclusive sales. So these are some of the concerns which were raised or allegations which were raised by Delhi Vyapar Mahasangh, and in the complaint it clearly stated, because of such practices, unethical practices which were done by these e-commerce companies, lakhs and lakhs of these stores have been forced to shut down. And now, after 4 years of investigation, the Competition Commission of India, which is the watchdog to ensure there is a fair competition, there is always a protection of the customer interest, etc. The Competition Commission of India is said to have come to a conclusion that yes, these companies have flouted, have violated the antitrust laws in India. Right, so this is basically the gist of the article which has been provided here. Now, please understand this. The report is yet to be made public. What kind of action will be taken by CCI? for these companies, etc. You will have to wait and see. Once the report is made public, all of this will be discussed again. Let me go to the next article. DPIIT wants local content calculation narrowed. Now, what is this local content calculation? Let me start with the basic idea first. Government of India, over a period of time, especially in the last 1 decade, has been promoting manufacturing activity in India. Correct? I'm pretty sure all of you will agree with me. Government of India has been promoting manufacturing activity. The reason cited by the government is India's import dependence is very, very high. We have a very high amount of import dependence. For example, let's say smartphones. Rather than importing all of this, why don't we promote manufacturing in the domestic market? And to promote manufacturing in the domestic market, various measures, various schemes or programs have already been implemented by the government. For example, Make in India. For example, PLI, production linked incentives, etc. Now, in order to promote manufacturing through the schemes, Government of India implemented one more very important reform, and that particular reform was basically local content requirement. Local content requirement. Now, what is this? Basically, the idea of a local content requirement. Back in the year 2017, the Government of India came out with set of rules which are very famously called as Public Procurement Preference to Make in India Order. Public Procurement Preference to Make in India Order, PPP MII order, which was issued by the government in 2017. Now, what is the importance of this order? Under this order, Government of India would distinguish between various manufacturers or the providers in the domestic market. The government would divide the manufacturers into class 1, class 2 and class 3. Now, what is the importance of this? Understand this. What is the importance of all of this? The class 1 manufacturers would have, at least 50%, the local content. That is, let's say hypothetically, if I am manufacturing a particular product, at least 50% of this will be done from the domestic market itself. That would be classified as a class 1. What about class 2? These manufacturers will have local content of at least 20% up to 50%. Right? At least 20 and up to 50%. So, class 1, at least 50% local content. Class 2, more than 20, less than 50. And earlier I said class 3, but there is no class 3 in case of this classification. Rest of them, that is those who will have less than 20% of the local content requirement, will be referred as non-class manufacturers or non-class suppliers. And what is the importance of classifying these companies or the providers into class 1, class 2 and non-class? Whenever government's procurement for goods, services or even works for that matter. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Whenever government wanted to procure from the market either goods or services or even works such as infrastructure projects, turnkey projects, the government would always provide a highest preference. For class 1. If class 1 is not there, then the next preference will be given to class 2. And lowest preference, assuming nobody else is available, would be given to non-class manufacturers. That is basically the importance of the Public Procurement, right, or PPP MII Order 2017. Now, what is the issue in the current affairs? Why should we understand this particular concept of the 2017 order? Listen to me very carefully. There is a concern that some of these suppliers, some of these manufacturers, companies, etc., are misusing these particular provisions. How so? The class 1 suppliers should have at least 50%, local content requirement. What these companies are doing is, they are actually having only 10% local content requirement. They are adding only 10% under the local content, and rest of the 40% they are able to add to this because they are consuming lot of services. They are training the employees, transportation, etc. All of these expenses, they are counting it as a part of the local content norm itself, thereby ensuring that they are easily meeting the 50% slab. I hope you understand, right? Out of, let's say, 100 rupees, 10 rupees worth of local content you are actually using, and remaining 40 rupees you are basically counting it as a part of service consumption. You are training your employees, you are transporting something, etc. You are adding all of it, and right, basically you are ensuring you are meeting 50% requirement, and now you are getting classified as a class 1 suppliers under the DPIIT's order. So that is the reason a concern has been raised. A concern has been raised, and now there is a letter, or there is a request which has been raised by DPIIT, which says that the government of India, that is specifically Finance Ministry, because understand this, under Ministry of Finance there is a particular cell which has been created. The cell is a public procurement cell. Public procurement cell which has been created, which takes care of all the grievances regarding the public procurement norms. So DPIIT is saying that lot of services are getting included, and as a result of majority of consumption of services, they are able to meet 50% requirement, and they are able to get maximum exposure to the government procurement requirements. They are able to basically sneak into this particular classification, right, by consuming more and more services. So DPIIT says narrow the definition. Narrow the definition so that they will actually manufacture, add value to the goods that they are, right, basically supplying, rather than simply meeting the requirement by spending lot of money in the services. And that is actually needed. That is, we need to ensure that these companies will promote, or let's say these companies will manufacture more and more, because Government of India has set up a target of having Atmanirbharta, self-reliance in the domestic manufacturing itself. So these are certain very important points regarding the DPIIT order. Now based on this, I have given an MCQ. Consider the following statements regarding public procurement order. It has been issued under the National Manufacturing Policy. Wrong. National Manufacturing Policy was proposed back in the year 2011. Now can you tell me what are the most important 1 or 2 points regarding National Manufacturing Policy? I am pretty sure you have heard of this particular scheme of Government of India, which is outcome of National Manufacturing Policy. What is the answer to that? Let me know in the comment section. First statement is wrong. A public procurement cell has been set up to monitor the grievances. Yes, second statement is correct. Is applicable for the procurement of goods, services as well as works. Yes, third statement is correct. So 2 and 3 are correct. How many statements are true? Right option will be option B. Only 2 of the statements are correct. Let me go to the next article. India Chinese Taipei request WTO to delay ruling on ICT import duty dispute. Let's try and understand the history behind it. Government of India, in order to promote manufacturing, has been targeting some of the imports and imposing higher tariffs on the imports. Very simple. For example, Government of India wants to promote more and more manufacturing of smartphones in India, mobile phones essentially. In order to promote manufacturing of this, Government of India, apart from other reforms, other schemes, has targeted some of the imports and has been imposing heavy tariffs, high tariffs on the products. And the logic behind that is very simple. On the imports, if I have a very high amount of tariff, rather than importing, producing the domestic market and selling will become cheaper. That will be promoted in India. So Government of India has identified various electronic products and has imposed the tariffs on that. And this is not new. It has been done by the government for many years now. But on the other side, understand the problem here. On the other side, India is a signatory to Information Technology Agreement 1. ITA 1, Information Technology Agreement 1. Information Technology Agreement is a plurilateral agreement. Please remember this. It's a plurilateral agreement. What is the basic idea of a plurilateral? Some of the countries will come together, group of countries will come together and sign this particular agreement. So WTO was established back in 1995. Ministerial conference was held after that. And after that, we implemented, India was a signatory to this. We implemented ITA 1. What was the basic idea of ITA 1? Certain electronic items were identified, products were identified, and we would reduce the tariffs to 0% so as to facilitate the trade of these products across the global market, across international borders. Over a period of time, right, just fast forward to 2015 now. Fast forward to 2015. 2015 is known for Nairobi Ministerial Conference. In the Nairobi Ministerial Conference, again the ITA was discussed, and there was one more agreement, ITA 2, Information Technology Agreement 2, wherein the number of commodities, number of products which were identified, information technology products which were identified, the goods, the sales of which, international sales of which would be promoted by reducing the tariffs to 0%, the list was expanded. But now Government of India said, no, I will not be part of ITA 2. India did not sign ITA 2. India is a part of ITA 1. Now after that, Government of India, in order to promote manufacturing, kept on targeting these electronic products which are coming into India and started imposing tariffs on these particular products. And then the problem started. What was the problem? Many countries, including Chinese Taipei, they looked at these tariffs which are imposed by the Government of India, dragged India to WTO, World Trade Organization Dispute Settlement Body, and they filed a complaint against India. The Dispute Settlement Body set up a panel investigated, and the report found that India's tariffs are wrong. These are not in conformity with many of the laws or many of the international trade rules, and Government of India should withdraw these particular tariffs. Government of India argued that whatever products we have identified to impose the tariffs, they were not existing when we signed ITA 1. So we have all the right. And second, you might simply say these are part of ITA 2, but we are not signatory to ITA 2. However, this particular report found, or the panel found, that India's tariffs, right, these do not conform with international laws or trade rules, and Government of India should withdraw. And whenever such panel findings are found, within 60 days, the dispute settlement body has to adopt it. Now, many of the times the countries have approached the DSB, have asked the DSB not to adopt the panel findings because the countries involved in the dispute, they want to sort this out. And same thing has happened here also. What has happened here? India as well as the other counterparty, Chinese Taipei, they have requested the WTO, that is the dispute settlement body, to delay adoption of the panel's findings because they want to resolve this particular issue mutually amongst themselves. So these are certain very, very important points regarding this article which is provided and which talks about a lot of international, or let's say WTO concepts involved here. Okay. Now, last article for this particular video, advanced transfer pricing packs hit a new high in the financial year 24. Should you remember the number of the APAs, UAPAs, BAPAs, etc.? Not needed. What is the basic idea? Please understand this. Whenever there is, right, a company, let's say, whenever there is a company, this might enter into certain transactions with another part of the company, that is the same company. Basically, there is a term called as transfer pricing. What is this transfer pricing? Whenever companies are involved in the, let's say, transactions, right, sale and purchase of goods, services, etc., whatever is the pricing determined, it is called as a transfer pricing. But there is always a concern that if a company which is present in India will enter into a transfer pricing with a related company outside India, the tax authorities later might raise an issue regarding taxation. They might simply raise an issue saying that the price at which you're purchasing or you're selling a particular product with a related commodity or with a related company, we do not think this pricing is applicable. There is no arm's length pricing. There's a term called as arm's length pricing, ALP. What is this arm's length pricing? Imagine you go to the market, you want to purchase a product. Is it okay if I say you want to purchase the product at as a lower price as possible? On the other hand, if I'm a seller, I want to sell it as high price as possible. So there are two different, right, let's say arguments here. There are two different targets for both of us. You want to purchase at lower price, I want to sell it at higher price. So we will negotiate and arrive at a price which is called as a arm's length pricing. And arm's length pricing is possible when the parties involved in the transactions are not related. And if the parties involved in the transactions are related, there might be, again I'm not saying all of them do this, there might be no arm's length pricing. There might be some other consideration such as movement of profits from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. So the concern is regarding arm's length pricing. If this company will enter into a transaction, that is a transfer pricing with related company, there is always a concern whether there is an arm's length pricing of the transaction or not. And that is the precise reason there is this concept of advanced pricing agreement, APA, advanced pricing agreement. APA was introduced by Government of India as a part of Finance Act of 2012. APAs, that is advanced pricing agreements, basically are agreements between the taxpayer and the tax department, where even before the transaction happens, even before this kind of international transaction happens, the pricing will be approved. Whatever is the pricing, whether this is arm's length pricing or not, will be approved by the tax authorities. Approved in the sense, they will look at the pricing methodology and they'll say, okay, we do not have any problem with respect to this kind of a pricing. What is the advantage of this? Advantage is simple. There will be tax certainty. I hope you understand. There will be certainty regarding taxation. Because the tax department itself says, I am okay with this kind of a pricing, no issues regarding pricing will be raised later once the transaction has happened. That will create certainty related to taxation. This will also reduce issues of litigation. This will also reduce the issues of tax demands raised by the tax authorities later, etc. That is the reason post 2012 the concept of advanced pricing agreement has become very famous in India. And whenever you talk about advanced pricing agreements, there can be three different types of APAs. One is called as unilateral, second one is bilateral, and the third one is multilateral APAs. And this article basically provides a lot of information regarding how many APAs have been signed. That is BAPAs, that is bilateral APAs, multilateral APAs, unilateral APAs, etc. You do not have to buy at this particular number. Understand the concept of advanced pricing agreements. That's more than sufficient for GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. So these are certain very important articles and the points that I wanted to discuss with you people. Before I wind up the session, again the very important announcement. Under Conquer Prelims 2024, we have two initiatives. One for static portion and the second one is dynamic. The static portion, the classes will be held every day at 6 p.m. on our platform. And second, the current affairs based, the MCQ based current affairs discussion is done on the YouTube in our Unacademy's IAS English YouTube channel. Now many of you will simply say, sir, I keep on forgetting. What happens? Should I keep on watching this video, etc.? Logic is very simple. Please join our Telegram channel. Before the class starts, we'll send you the intimation. The update is provided. You can directly join using the link from the Telegram channel itself. So these are certain things that I wanted to discuss with you people. If you like these initiatives, hit the like button. And if you yet to subscribe to our YouTube channel, kindly do it now. Thank you. Have a great day.